I work as policy advisor at NUFIC, the Dutch EMIC-NERIC, and will be hosting this webinar. This webinar has been organized as part of the Erasmus Plus project, REACT, Refugees and Recognition, and is the first in a series of 5 webinars that will be given in the coming months. Our presenter today is my colleague, Loes Janssen. Loes works as credential evaluator at NUFIC, and her area of expertise is the educational systems of countries in the Middle East. As part of the REACT project, Loes and our other colleague, Karim Darwish, have written a country briefing on Iran. This country briefing provides an overview of higher education in Iran and recommendations for the evaluation of credentials of refugees, displaced persons, and persons in a refugee-like situation from Iran. The presentation that Loes will be giving today is based on the country briefing. Before getting started, I would like to say a few words about the REACT project. This project builds on the first part of the recently completed Refugees and Recognition project, the goal of which was to develop a common methodology for the recognition of refugees' qualifications. In addition to testing that methodology further, an important activity of the current REACT project is to publish country briefings and offer webinars on the educational systems of Iran, Ethiopia, Somalia, Venezuela, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and to provide recommendations on the evaluation of refugee qualifications coming from these countries. Project partners are the EMIC-NERIC offices located in Germany, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, and Norway. And Norway is responsible for coordinating the project. We want to reach as many stakeholders as possible, so the country briefings will be available soon on the project website. All of the webinars, including this one, are being recorded, and these recordings will also be published on the project website. Just 2 more things that I'd like to mention before we start. After Loes has given her presentation, we will open up the floor to questions and answers. We'd appreciate it if you would wait until the end of Loes's presentation to ask any questions. And you can use the chat function, which is located on the bottom right of your screen. And after the Q&A, there will be a short survey, which we would be also very much appreciative if you could fill in this short survey, 4 questions, just to get your feedback on the webinar and to help us improve them. Thank you for your attention so far. I will now turn off my microphone and turn the webinar over to Loes. Loes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, for your introduction. Hello and welcome, everyone. As Jessica said, my name is Loes and I'm a credential evaluator for the Middle Eastern region at NUFIC. I will be discussing the educational system of Iran today. So let's jump right in and start with our first slide. Here you can see a few facts about Iran. And after the revolution in 1979, many things changed, including the educational system. Besides the Islamization that took place, several wars and violation of human rights have led to outflow of refugees from Iran. If we look at our second slide, we see a chart of the educational system as it was at the end of the last school year. The 2012 educational reforms will come into full effect in the 2018-2019 school year. But as there are no documents yet from the new system that require evaluation, it is more important to look at the way it was. We will get back to the reforms, however, when we talk about the different degrees. So from the early 90s, when the last reform took place, until 2012, Iran was a 5+3+3+1 system. 5 years of primary education, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, 3 years of lower secondary education, 3 years of secondary education, and then 1 year of upper secondary education. Then after a national entrance examination, one gains access to higher education, which consists of associate degrees, bachelor's, master's, and the doctorate or PhD at the top of the slide. Alrighty, so let's start at the beginning. Until 2012, basic education consisted of 5 years of primary education and 3 years of lower secondary education. And with the reforms of 2012, a year was added to primary education, making it 6 years in length. So in the slide, you can see the differences between before the reform and after the reform. And the name of lower secondary education was also changed to the first secondary cycle. At the end of grade 8 or 9, depending on the year the document you have is from, students must take regional exams and upon success are awarded the Certificate of General Education. Students then enter the second secondary cycle as it is known since 2012. And here we have an example of the Certificate of General Education with a translation alongside of it. As you can see, this is a portrait form diploma. Then we move on to secondary education. So depending upon their results in the exams that lead to the Certificate of General Education, but also to a lesser extent their preference, students are divided into 3 streams. We have the technical or vocational program. Then, as we see on this page, we also have the work and knowledge stream. And the third one is the theoretical or academic program. All streams last 3 years, require 90 to 96 credits, and upon completion, students are awarded their Certificate of Completion of Secondary School Studies. As you can see in the examples, which are, this is an example of the technical or vocational secondary education diploma. Then we have the work and knowledge secondary education diploma and the academic certificate of completion of secondary school studies. Apart from minor changes over the years, these documents are all very similar. So it is important to look for the exact stream on the document. And from the late 60s until the early 1990s, this cycle lasted 4 years, from grade 9 to grade 12. Let's see, as you can see here, the difference between the different reforms. Upon completion, students had direct access to tertiary education, bar the entrance examinations, of course. But that changed in the early 1990s. Students then had to complete their secondary education, but afterwards enter a pre-university course. And this course lasted, this course lasted 1 year and led to the pre-university certificate, which gave them access to higher education. This certificate has been abolished at the reforms of 2012 and has been given last in 2018. So starting this school year, students will no longer receive the pre-university certificate, but will have access to higher education with their secondary education diploma. Let's see, here we have an example of the pre-university certificate, also very similar in layout to the secondary education diploma. So once again, it's very important to watch out for the key words. As you see here in the title up top, the name of the pre-university certificate. Then we move on to higher education. There are state and private institutions that can be divided into 4 categories. We have universities, higher education institutions, technical institutes, and teacher training colleges. All private institutions were taken over by the government after the revolution, but the ban was lifted in the late 1980s. One of the private institutions founded after the revolution, Islamic Azad University, is now one of the largest university systems in the world, with 553 branches, including 133 Sama schools in 2015-2016. The biggest public university system in Iran is Payam Noor University, with almost 1 million students enrolled. It was the country's first distance education provider when it was founded in the late 1980s. All institutions, however, state or private, are under the supervision of the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology. except for medical schools, which are supervised by the Ministry of Health, Treatment and Medical Education. The Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution is the highest authority, however. It controls policy, regulations, approval of programs, and recognition of institutions. Entering most state or private institutions requires passing the National Entrance Examination, or the concours, as it is called. The Islamic Azad University has its own entrance examinations. The entry requirement for all entrance examinations, however, is the pre-university certificate. And as I said before, after this school year, it will be the certificate of completion of secondary school studies again. So there are currently 5 types of qualifications available in higher education. The first one being the associate degree, or Cardani. It normally takes 2 years to complete this degree. However, it can also be taken as an integrated program starting after lower secondary education is completed. This way, its normal duration is 5 years. After completing the 2-year version, a student can gain access to the 3rd year of a bachelor program. And both versions, however, can also be terminal qualifications and qualify the holder for a profession. We see an example of this diploma here. Let's see, along with a transcript. Next, we have the bachelor's degree, or Karshanazi. This 4-year qualification requires 130 or more credits and is required to enter a master program. This is only possible if the student received good grades. There are 2 kinds of bachelor's degree. The first one is the Karshanazi Napaivaste, or discontinuous bachelor. This means that someone has first obtained an associate degree, or Kardani, and then entered the 3rd year of the bachelor program, finishing in 2 years instead of the usual 4. The second kind is a Karshanazi Paivaste, or continuous bachelor, which means the student has completed the entire bachelor program. And here you can see an example of a bachelor degree along with a translation. Next, we have the professional doctorate, or doctora. The duration of this program is 5 to 7 years, depending on what area of study you have chosen. And it's meant to be a terminal qualification, qualifying the holder for a certain profession. Those professions are, as you can see on the slide here, architecture, dentistry, pharmacy, and veterinary medicine with a duration of 5 or 6 years, and medicine with a duration of 6 or 7 years. Credits are the best indicator of program length with this qualification, as most students take longer to finish. So 180 credits means 5 years, 210 credits means 6 years, and 290 credits indicates a program length of 7 years. On this page, you see an example of the doctora. The master's degree is the first stage of postgraduate education in Iran. If it is research-oriented, it requires 28-32 credits. If it is coursework-oriented, then it requires 36 to 40 credits. But a thesis is always a requirement and can be up to 10 credits. As with the bachelor's degree, there are 2 kinds of master degrees. The first one is the Karshanazi Arshad Napaivaste, or discontinuous master. This means that someone has entered the master program after completing a separate bachelor program. A Karshanazi Arshad Paivaste, or continuous master, is also known as an integrated master's degree, which is a unified degree of bachelor and master in some professional specializations, such as architecture. And here we have an example of a master degree, along with a transcript. Now, if a student obtains good grades in the master program, he or she can access the 2nd stage of postgraduate education, which is the doctorate. The doctora, or doctora taxis, is more commonly referred to as a Doctor of Philosophy, or PhD. This is often also stated on the diploma in Latin script, as you can see in this example here. I'm sure you'll all find it very quickly in the middle of the document, it says PhD quite clearly. Let's see. This program can last between 3 years minimum and 6 years maximum and consists of 2 stages, 12 to 30 credits of coursework, followed by a comprehensive exam to gain admission to the next stage, which consists of research and a doctoral thesis. So after this, hopefully somewhat comprehensible overview of all degrees, we can take a look at the rather clear grading system of Iran. All layers of the educational system use a scale of 0 to 20. In basic education, a 7 is the minimum, but a 10 is required to transfer to the next year. Persian, however, is an exception to this rule, as a 10 is the minimum in this subject. In secondary education, higher secondary education, and at the bachelor level, a 10 is the minimum requirement. And at the master level, a 12 is the minimum, but a 14 is required to transfer to the next year. And at the doctorate level, finally, a minimum of 14 is required in all subjects. So you can see it quite clearly just moves up with every level. So next we have some evaluation tips and recommendations when evaluating an Iranian document. Iranian documents are normally written in Farsi or Persian, the Iranian language that uses an Arabic-like script. There are only a select few universities that hand out English documents. If the documents are written in Farsi, then normally the Iranian calendar and Perso-Arabic numerals are also used. It is, however, possible to find Eastern Arabic numerals or a mix of both on an official document. It doesn't happen often, but it is possible. A complete file should contain an official diploma in landscape form and an accompanying transcript in portrait form. Older diplomas that predate 1992 are in portrait form. A complete file should also include an official translation. And if the official translation is made in Iran, it is usually authorized by the Ministry of Justice. But authorized translations do not provide confirmation of authenticity, however. So dates, degrees, etc. are sometimes translated wrongly. So important information needs to be double-checked, and I highly recommend doing so. Should a file contain a bachelor's degree with a transcript of only 2 years of study, then it is likely the case that this is a discontinuous bachelor's degree. The course of action in such a case would be to request to see the associate degree and the accompanying transcript as well, as it is seen as part of the bachelor program in this case. Many people only have a temporary certificate instead of an official diploma. Temporary certificates are almost always in portrait form and have the words muvakat or temporary in the title. This could mean, for example, that they still need to pay a certain fee or that they haven't done their military service yet or at all. For refugees, this can mean that they are not able to receive their official diploma. Therefore, temporary certificates can be accepted instead. It is possible to email the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology to verify the accreditation of an educational institution if you have any doubts. So that would be very useful in some cases. And for good practices regarding the evaluation of documents from refugees, please see Chapter 12 of the EAR manual. Now, before emailing the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology, it is also possible to search their website for the accreditation of the institution you have encountered. The English website only states some of the public universities, but the Persian website has lists of all the different types of recognized institutions. Here you can also find contact information for the institutions. The other links you see on this slide provide the other links you see on this slide that are also provided in a country profile are useful if you wish to check the dates on the documents, which I highly recommend. And if you wish to have more extensive information of the educational system of Iran, which you can find in the existing country profiles you see here. Here are the references used. And that's already the end of this presentation. So thank you for your attention, and back to Jessica.
Thank you, Luz, for that very informative presentation. I can imagine that there are questions. So if anybody has a question for Luz about her presentation, please use the chat and write your question, and hopefully she can answer it. Not everybody at once. Ha ha ha. I do see somebody is typing. I'm going to mute myself so Luz can take over again.
Hello, Eric. Thank you for your question. Yes, we haven't focused on teacher education, you're right. Not sure exactly what your question entails, though. Could you maybe specify? All right, so you wish to know more about the teacher education. We can do that. Let's see. Yeah, there are several institutions where one can learn to be a teacher, depending on if you want to be a secondary school teacher or a primary school teacher. Primary school teaching requires only a 2-year course, as and higher secondary education requires a bachelor program to be completed before one can become a teacher. Let's see. And the names of these institutions have indeed changed. Before you had the National Teachers College and the Tarbiyat Muallim University, who have both changed names into the University for Teacher Education, respectively, and Kharasmi University. Let's see. You also have Shahid Rajai University, which is the main provider of teacher training programs at associate level, so for primary education. I hope that answers your question. Let's see, Robert's question about the study transcript not being provided after graduation, that is not common. Normally, a transcript is always provided. Let's see, then we have Samantha. She says a temporary certificate. No, we normally ask the person who wishes to have their documents evaluated if they have an official document or if they can get one. But if this is not the case, then we would assess a temporary certificate in the same way. Eric, I'm not quite sure I understand your second question about statements from a new university about degrees taken under older regulations. You mean in relation to universities changing names? Regarding Robert's question on getting a Cardani in the middle of a bachelor program, however, the requirements are normally getting the amount of credits required for an associate degree. And let's go back to the slides. Sorry. Yes, so if the number of credits for an associate degree, as you can see here in the slides, 68 to 78, depending on the program, if these credits have been obtained, then it is possible to get a Cardani. So I hope that answers your question. Bianca, regarding your question as to online data, at the moment we're not aware of any possibility to access this, but we would love to hear from anyone who has found this data online. I'm not quite sure what you mean with the application's chances for recognition as refugees. Besides the fact that the question regards their chances in Germany, as we're located in the Netherlands, we are normally not involved in their possibilities in Germany. Okay, thank you for your explanation, Eric. I do understand what you mean now, but I'm not sure we have encountered such statements before. We would have to look into that, I'm afraid. Xenia, it is possible to study in English, but only at a very few number of universities. See if I can find them for you this quickly. Yeah, I'm very sorry. I don't have them at hand right now, but it is possible to study in English at some universities who also issue documents in English. So yes, that would not necessarily mean that it is not authentic. Robert, I'm not quite sure what you mean between changes between the transcript and the study curriculum. Do you mean that it can change over time, so the transcript doesn't match what they are offering right now? Because that's, of course, a possibility at any institution. Bianca, at the moment, I'm not aware of the fact that Afghan citizens would be barred from admission. I'm not quite sure we've encountered any that studied in Iran. I see that Bianca is able to answer Uni Passau's question. Thank you for that. Okay, Robert, I think we understand your question now, but yes, we have seen that before, but there's unfortunately not a clear explanation at the moment for this happening. And that's really something to assess in any case individually. You could possibly try and contact the institution and ask for an explanation. But when that's not possible, you have to make decisions sometimes. So it really depends on the individual cases. Let's see, Samantha's question regarding the grading system. This has been the case since before the 1990s reform. So as that was the reform before that was in effect since the late 60s. So I'm not 100% sure, but it has probably been used since then. We've not encountered different documents anyway, disregarding the several universities that use English and give English documents that can also use letters sometimes instead of this grading system. But overall, it has been used for the last decade. Okay, so regarding Robert's question, if it is possible for Iranian refugees to obtain transcripts afterwards, this is possible in some cases, but this is mostly the case for private institutions. For public institutions, this is much more difficult. Let's see, Eric's question regarding the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education, which is not formally recognized by the government of Iran. In that case, we would describe the context of the institution. So that it provides certain documents which could be at a certain level and give a similar diploma to compare it to, but we make very clear that it is not formally recognized so that we can't be 100% sure of the quality of education. Let's see, then continuing on to Robert's question, I'm afraid I'm not quite sure what you mean with those courses. Perhaps we have not seen them here yet. Could you maybe explain this a bit more? I see that Robert is hopefully typing an explanation right now, but if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask them during. Thank you for your explanation, Robert. As far as we can tell, these are more technical vocational qualifications. We don't deal with them very often, as in the Netherlands we have a separation between NUFIC, which deals with higher education and secondary education, and SBB, which deals with professional education. So we don't see those very often or at all. But like I said, they appear to be some sort of technical or vocational diplomas. And unfortunately, right now, I have no other information regarding those. Thank you for the further explanation, Robert. Unfortunately, right now we don't have any further information regarding this qualification, but perhaps you can send us an example of this and we could look into it. But like I said, unfortunately, I can't tell you any more about it right now. Now, if there are any further questions, please type them into the chat. Otherwise, I will hand the floor back to Jessica, who will finish this presentation.
Okay, here we are again. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and also Luz for answering them. Very informative, and yeah, it's great to have this chat, be able to get extra information. This concludes our webinar, except for the survey, which I would like very much if everybody could fill in. It'll take you 1 minute at maximum. And I just want to make sure that you know that the PowerPoint presentation, the Word document country briefing, and a recording of this webinar will all be available on the website, the project website. And I'm assuming that everybody has that URL, but I will see if I can copy it in the chat in case you can't. So all of this information will be available there. Let's see, this is the survey. As you can see, it's very simple, 3 or 4 questions. And I'd appreciate it very much if you could fill it in. And I want to thank all of you for attending this webinar. And don't forget, we will have our second webinar. I have to check exactly which date. The second webinar will be on the education system of, will be on Ethiopia and be given by the Norwegian NERIC on the 7th of February. So tune in again for the same, for a webinar on Ethiopia. Okay.